So my name is Simone VANNUCCINI, and I am one of the two PI of the project GLORIVALS, for which we kindly thank the Academy One for the support. And this is another project that comes from more the social science perspective. So myself and Sara Belloni, who co-lead the project, we are affiliated to GREDEG, so we are economists. And the idea, though, is to impinge on the so to give an economic perspective to a phenomenon that has to do with networks, digital transformation, the processing of information, new technological dynamics. So it is very much under the remit of academia. So the project is called GLORIVALS, which means or stands for Global Rivalries and Firm Dynamics in the Technology Trade Multiplex. And if you want, in the nutshell, the project just started. In the sense, it was financed a few months ago, but we got funding for a postdoc and data collection, so we could hire the postdoc only recently. So we set up all the groundwork for the research to be conducted in the months to come. So the rationale for the project, if you follow the news, you might have seen that we live in a world that is increasingly more fragmented. Okay, that's certainly not a good news, but we see that international trade and the globalization is, let's say, under growth with different things happening, global reshoring, so production is brought back to different countries in Europe and in the US after having been, let's say, produced and localized in East Asia. You have this guy, you might have heard the name Macron, who said that now after Trump election, we as Europeans try to develop our own capabilities to produce certain technologies and product. You might have seen that there is the so-called Draghi report. So you have the former president of the European Central Bank and Prime Minister of Italy that suggests that Europe is a little bit laggard in investments and technological development. And we have somehow trade-related technological dynamics. For example, you know very well what TSMC is. So it's the top producer of semiconductor, so top fabricator of semiconductor in Taiwan that increasingly access funding in the US, at least until last week, to reshore production and innovation in the semiconductor industry on the American soil. You have Chinese companies that are subject to trade bans, export bans for semiconductor manufacturing that anyway try to find their way to innovate. So if you put together all these pictures, the idea is that somehow what is happening at the global geopolitical level in terms of transformation of the globalization is having impact on how, whether, in which direction, especially in firms innovate. Okay, so the idea of GLORIVALS is to focus indeed on high-tech technological innovation to see whether we can trace. Yes, I'm moving a little bit, so I think the recording will be a bit shaky, but to see whether the shocks that happen at the global level and that are leading to a more fragmented globalization are in turn changing the mix of product exported and imported, so the network of trade in which firms in Europe, and particularly for us, France, are active, and whether then this influences the direction of innovation that firms engage to. So, with an example, if it's not anymore possible to import a certain type of electric batteries, or if it's not possible to rely on rare earth materials from China, or if it's not possible to use certain type of manufacturing equipment coming from certain partners in international trade, now not anymore, European and in particular French companies changing the type of innovation that they do. So our companies were producing combustion engine, now producing electric vehicles. Our companies were only producing chip design, now also fabricating the chips, and so on and so forth. So This type of question is very important, and here we go to the why, because somehow, given this race of strategy towards what has been called in political circles strategic autonomy, technological sovereignty, this is not necessarily a good thing, but is really the top list of policymakers nowadays. And there is a lot of reporting on that, there is a lot of commentary on that, there is not so much quantitative evidence. Okay, so the idea of our project is to be one of the first attempts to provide solid quantitative evidence on the innovation impact of the global fragmentation that is ongoing. How do we do that? We try to measure what we would call the traded product exposure of inventions, so how specific inventions. You have inventions you can capture, most of them, not all of them, with patents or with brevet. And different inventions based on who invents the firms, and given what these firms do, we will have different exposure to the traded products. So if these inventions rely very much on raw materials or certain equipment, and these firms are embedded in international networks to source and sell this type of intermediate inputs, then this invention will be very much exposed to change in international trade. So we want to relate these international trade shocks to the change in innovation. This is also one direction. So there is literature that somehow is trying to understand the economic impact of global rivalries, as they are called, but nobody yet has focused on the shift in research direction. And for us, this is important because somehow invention and innovation does not happen in the void. And the idea here is, I mean, it's a bit of an economic framework, but it means that when you as a firm want to innovate, so want to create a new combination of knowledge, you will invest some resources and you have different trajectories that you can follow. Okay, these different trajectories, they might have different rate of returns or expectation of gains or uncertainty connected with the technology. And the idea is that somehow global rivalries among other variables are willing to change the returns of different type of technologies one firm might want to invest in. So to say differently, the opportunities to innovate technologically are strongly affected by what is happening upstream at the macro global level. How the project is structured. So the key thing of the project, that is an economics project, meaning that we are gonna have a quantitative analysis and econometric, which means statistical analysis relating variables at different levels, what we call the multiplex, because it's a potential network variables at different levels. We will connect the shocks at the international level, indeed, trade bans, war between so the Russian attack to Ukraine, potentially COVID, but I mean, we want to focus on the more technological related kind of shocks. This affects the trade space, meaning the network of products that each firm export and import. And the change in the trade space will affect the innovation space. So where it is worth or not worth to invest in order to develop new technology. And the challenge here and the novelty is that we want to combine, and that's why we are working with the Academy on, is that we want to combine measurements of these dimensions, these aspects that are both either standard, so Scala measures, indicators, but also new type of measurements. So the work that we have to do is on measuring the shocks. So how do you measure a shock, like once again, the export bans from US to China semiconductor equipment? Then you can just have a shock variable. So from this day, it's not anymore possible to export. Or you can try to measure this structural transformation, for example, by analyzing using text analysis, the increasing urge to intervene in the field, the increasing the relevance of this kind of topics in the corpus of texts. That could be the news, it could be sentiment, it could be official documents, it could be speeches, and so on and so forth. And when we measure that, then we need to measure the trade space. So how do we measure the changes in trade space, which will lead to network indicator mostly, and how we measure the change in the direction of innovation. You know that usually Americans are familiar with patents, whether you apply for patents or you have patents, but each patent that captures an invention that is protected by intellectual property rights has a series of technology code that classify the technology. So this allows, so if you as a firm start to patent in different codes, means that you are changing your direction. And then of course it could also be that you always patent in the same code, but you do different things. So you might also explore the text of the patents and the references of the patents to look at whether you start to do with electric batteries rather than classic batteries and so on and so forth. And this we can do at the firm level, which we plan to do. So now I'll tell you about the data, or at the macroeconomic level. So that we have two directions that we can explore. So what we've been doing until now is to explore and start collecting the data, because this project requires a lot of work of data, not only collection, but also merging, okay? So we applied for obtaining administrative firm-level data on the universe of French firms. Then we will have to select the firms that are also patenting, of course. And this required statistical secure application, so we had to go through that, which we did. And this type of firm-level data contains the ownership structure, the size, the turnover, the R&D investment. You have a lot of covariates related to the firms. We collected data from patent offices, in particular the PatStat database, which is the hundreds of million patents applied for and granted to firms worldwide. The problem for us, the challenge for us, and that's why we apply for also postdoc support, is that we need to merge the data, so to combine the ideas of the inventors or the applicants better and the firms in our firm-level database. So that is something that requires computational approaches. It's not so trivial. We also have data on bilateral tariffs, tariff barriers, so to have trade information. We collect the trade level, product level trade data, and we are also collecting different indicators and different type of information, these risks of international fragmentation. So the literature already very recently started to provide, to build some indicators that somehow see how some countries are exposed to geopolitical risks. So there is a paper, for example, very recently in the top-ranked journal on this geopolitical risk indicator. But we're also going to develop our own indicators and our own measurements. And the idea is also to compare different measures to see what fares better, or to have an ensemble, let's say, of measurements to measure the global revenues. And we are going to also derive part of these indicators from text analysis of relevant documents to see whether we can capture this narrative shift towards rivalries and technological sovereignty that affects trade. So this replaced that in a bit of self-advertisement for our as PIs, replace that in perspective. So as you know, as Academy One, we want to do novel breakthrough research that builds also on existing competencies. So we have ongoing research that relates to using the network theory to study trade, work on specific technologies and how policies, and in particular industrial policy, are supporting the development of competencies in this technology. So that means that can we scale that up and look at that through a more firm level but global perspective. So it's interdisciplinary because it uses computational methods, is focused in depth on the nature of technology, but it has an economic flavor. And it's also novel because there is nothing on this in the literature, which just starts now to try to develop quantitative analysis of these aspects. And so we hope that, to end up with a nice, also societally relevant contribution. So that's it. You can see we also have a wonderful logo that has been done by us through Canva, so basic tools, but there is no limit to creativity.